The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Unit 6 of the Lunch and Learn series. I just want to do a quick sound check, the normal sort of process, make sure I'm coming across loud and clear. Could I ask you over in the question box just to type in the word clear? That helps me. Okay, great. Okay, coming across loud and clear, which is good. I just did a webinar earlier and we just had a few internet problems. Not that I can do much about it, but if we'll just see how we travel. Okay, so we're actually at the last unit of the series. So congratulations for coming this far, and we're going to look at meetings today. Now you might say, why am I including meetings? Because we spend our whole life in meetings, right? This is a meeting. When you finish here, you're going to another meeting, and then another meeting. It never ends. And so if we're going to be good at leading, then obviously running effective meetings has to be part of our repertoire, if you like. And of course, you attend a lot of meetings where you're not chairing the meeting, and perhaps those meetings aren't very efficient or effective. But certainly, when you're facilitating a meeting, I'm going to give you a few tips and hints that I think will work very, very well for you in your own teams. So you just discard what doesn't work for you, and then take on board, the things that will work for you. All right, and as usual, just type in questions over in the question box, bearing in mind, of course, I'm the only one that gets to see the question, and then I'll respond to it as soon as I see it. And over the weekend, I'll send you a copy of the slides and, of course, also the recording. So just relax and just take on board those issues and those ideas that you think are going to work for you. So the whole notion of this is just to take one or two really good ideas out that work for you and then just apply them and away you go. Yeah, no worries, Thor. Thank you for letting me know you're late. Okay, let's move on. So we have here the 6 modules that we have now covered or are just about to cover. So we had in feedback, which we obviously thought was very important to give that feedback, both positive and negative. You did a influencing capabilities profile, you might recall, and we did talk about improving and enhancing your ability to influence other people. We talked about optimizing team performance and some of the things that needed to happen there, but principally the key message out of Unit 3 was to have more focused conversations with your team members, and I hope you've been able to achieve that. In Module 4 or Unit 4, we looked at getting the very best from people. So this was some motivational theory, and you might recall I went through the top 10 things that people wanted in their work. And you might also recall that number 1 on the list was working for an effective leader or manager. And of course, that's got implications for you. In Unit 5, you had to complete a diagnostic, the last one a fortnight ago, on understanding people and their personalities. And I got you to do that so that it just sensitised you to the fact that we've all got different ways of approaching things. And I'm hoping you had a bit of fun with that and started to look at your team in a different light. Because sometimes by not doing something like that, you can get very upset or annoyed that they don't see the world the way you do, and vice versa, of course. So now we're talking about facilitating effective meetings as such. Your homework, of course, was to try to approach people that you lead with an emphasis on their own personality type. And I think, I'd be always keen to hear your stories around that and whether or not that's been effective for you. I'm sure it has, and it's quite surprising how effective it is when you emphasise that whole point. In fact, the whole module last fortnight was really based on the platinum rule. The golden rule, of course, is treat people how you want to be treated. And of course, in terms of respect and dignity and things like that, obviously that applies. But when it comes to personality, it should be different. And that is, we treat people how they want to be treated. And if we do that, of course, we are likely to get a much better result. So I hope you've had a bit of fun and had a bit of a look around and considered people in a different light, if you like. So that was that part. So let's move on to today, which of course is about teams. So I'm going to talk about the context of teams. So what sort of, context of meetings. So what sort of meetings do you attend? Let's just sort of get some categories around those and try and understand what the landscape of teams really entails. We're going to talk about some issues around structuring the meetings themselves and to make them more efficient and effective. And we're going to talk about some interpersonal and leadership skills that you can use when you are actually facilitating a meeting, what you might be able to do differently. So I want you to be a bit bold here and try some new things and not just fall back to bad habits that have probably been going on for a while, probably because you've been seeing other people, your leaders, making the same mistake. So I want to give you some challenges to go away and try some things different, some different things. And I'm going to give you a couple of very, very practical and simple ideas that will help enrich your team meetings. And then we're done. Okay, so that's where we're going over the next hour. So let's talk about the concept of meetings to start with. Now, I would have to say to you that getting good at running productive meetings has to be one of the most critical and untapped skills of any leader. Because how many meetings have you attended this week? You probably don't know because you've lost count. And you've probably got another meeting this afternoon, if not 2 or 3. So the reality is our whole life is spent in meetings. So it seems to me that if we're actually going to be effective leaders, then we just need to get good at this skill. Now, the good news for you is if you get good at this skill, let me assure you, you will stand out from your peers without any doubt whatsoever, because people aren't generally good at this skill. And so therefore you'll stand out. People will enjoy coming to your meetings. You'll get more done. And, it just creates a whole spiral of upward morale as well. And of course, the flip side's true. If you have poor meetings and run poor meetings, it's likely that they probably won't go as well as you'd like. So if we now consider that, another concept I'd like you to consider is this, that meetings themselves are not productive. Have you ever thought about that? The meetings themselves are not productive. It's actually what happens or doesn't happen between meetings that determines the effectiveness of a meeting. So in other words, all a meeting is about is to marshal and organise and discuss, and then what happens after that becomes the critically important issue. So that's important. It's like what we're doing here in the Lunch and Learn series. Whilst you might find this interesting and entertaining, the reality is if you don't do anything different out of these meetings that we're having, these 6 one-hour sessions, then really it's kind of like a waste of time, the 6 hours that you've spent online with me. So it's what happens out of the meetings that becomes critically important. So I want you to think about it that way, that the meetings are about orientating people's thinking and behaviour between meetings. That becomes the critically important component. That doesn't mean things in meetings aren't useful to discuss. It doesn't mean information's not valuable to share. But in terms of the effectiveness of the meeting, it's what people do with that information after the meeting that's critically important. So if we consider that, the different reasons that we meet, here are some reasons that we all meet. Some meetings are information meetings where you or your boss is sharing information with you. So it might be a new direction for the command, or it might be a new direction for the department or whatever. And this person wants to share and update with you what's happening because, it's important that you know. So informations can be there to inform, meetings can be there to inform us. Meetings can also be there to educate us, and I'd like to think that the meetings that you're attending with me online now are just that. So they can be there to give you some education, which of course are training programs and workshops. Meetings can also clarify issues. So if you've got a contentious issue in your organisation, maybe there's two camps or there's a difficult issue that really is a little bit, all the facts aren't clear and there's some misunderstandings that are going on, the manager may call a meeting and try to clarify a situation. So meetings can be about clarifying what's happening. Meetings can also be about engaging your team in conversation about various problems that need to be resolved. And so those meetings are about taking the team with you. Meetings, of course, can also be about solving collective problems. So there's a problem affecting the team and you want to use the resources of the team and all the minds in the room to solve a problem. So meetings can be about that. They can also be about reviewing progress. So this could be work in progress meetings. So we actually have a project that we're working on. We need to know where people are up to, what people are doing, what are some of the barriers, and so forth. And so meetings can be about that. And meetings, of course, also can be about making decisions and, more or less collective decisions and getting agreement from people around the table, or at least consensus about what decision that needs to be made. So you can see, and of course there's a lot of crossover with all of those things. Some meetings would cover 3 or 4 of those items. So there's a lot of reasons why we meet. And so the first thing we've got to be is absolutely crystal clear about why we're meeting. What are we trying to do? We're trying to inform people, we're trying to educate people, we're trying to take people with us. It's a good idea to be clear about that before you meet, not just going through the hurly-burly of having a meeting because it happens to be Monday morning at 9 o'clock. All right, so that's you might want to think about those sorts of issues. Now, the other thing that I think is very important, that, every time you run a meeting, it's quite a costly exercise. Have you thought about that? Now, of course, we don't account for the cost. We don't put it on a spreadsheet or something. But if you actually think about it, if you've got 6 people in a room sitting around a table for an hour, there's 6 hours of time that's taken. And in fact, it's not 6 hours, it's actually 12 hours, because while people are sitting around the table, they're not attending to other issues unless they're fiddling around with their iPhone or doing emails or whatever. So it's actually 12 hours because there's 6 hours of opportunity costs that are lost. So if you had one of those every week, right, we're talking serious amounts of money over the course of say a year. So you want to make sure that those meetings are effective. Let me give you some figures just to get your head around this. So if you work out, here's a little bit of maths for you. If this is a way of working this out for your own self, of course. What's the average income of your team per hour? Now, it's not hard to work that out. I'm sure you know what they get paid. So if you work it out and divide it by, so you get an hourly rate. So let's argue that you've done that. You've worked out that it's $31.25 per hour per person for a meeting. Okay? So you know that. Then the next question is, how many meetings on average do your team members attend per week? Now that wouldn't be hard to work out. You could just talk to them, or you may have their calendars already available. So just work out how many meetings your team attend. They may not all be meetings with you, of course. They might be meetings with other other stakeholders, other agencies, other teams. So work that out, right? And then typically, how long do these meetings last? Let's argue an hour for the sake of round figures. How many people are there in your team? And then you multiply all of that by 2, because obviously while people are sitting in on meetings, they're not doing other work that they're supposed to do. So let me give you some real figures on this. Let's assume, and I'm going to be fairly conservative here, let's assume that the average income, as I said, is $31.25. Let's assume that the typical number of meetings each of your team member attend is 5 a week, which is probably very conservative. Let's assume that they're 2 hours long, and maybe that means that each person's attending about 10 hours a week of meetings. Now, I don't think that's probably pretty practical. Maybe even underestimated, certainly not overestimated. And let's assume you've got 6 people in your team. So that means that of those 10 hours and times 6 people, that's 60 hours of time that during the week your team members attend meetings. And so that's not really 60 hours, that's 120 hours, because while they're doing that, of course, they can't be doing other work. So if you think about the figures, that is actually over the course of 12 months, I've calculated that to be, and on those figures that you see in front of you, it's costing you, that's your team, $195,000 just to meet. Now, that's probably not a scary figure, really. I guess if it was in your budget, in your team budget, you would probably have a good look at it. You'd probably consider whether or not you're getting value for money out of that $195,000 a year. And you may scrutinise it and think, how can we actually reduce the cost there? Well, the obvious way is having less meetings, but I'm not suggesting we do that. But you would start to look at it if it was a line item in your budget. That's my point, particularly if your organisation's going through budget cuts, and I know some of your organisations are doing just that. So if we actually had an organisation, let's say of 1,000 people, and there are some people in this broadcast who have a lot more than 1,000 people in their organisation, but let's just pick 1,000. That actually works out to be $32.5 million a year spent sitting around a table. 32.5 million. Now, in an organisation of 1,000, it's probably not, it looks worse than it probably is. But my point is, if it was a line item in the budget, you would probably be scrutinising it again and saying, are we getting $32.5 million worth of value from our meetings? Now, I just want to sensitise you to that, because I think sometimes we just go to mindless meetings and we don't think too much about it. We call meetings when we perhaps don't need to, and all of this adds up to cost, particularly when you've got a number of people in the room. So food for thought, no doubt. And if you've got any comment about that or questions, I'm quite happy for you to fire away, because it is an interesting figure, isn't it? Now, a couple of key things and tips that I would suggest in terms of you meeting. I would strongly recommend that you do not rotate the chair. There's been a little bit of a kind of, over the last, I suppose, decade, people have said, oh yes, we'll rotate the chair because that way we'll get everyone involved in the meeting. Well, first of all, some people absolutely dread the idea of chairing a meeting. So if they're going to dread that, they're probably not going to do a very good job at it. And secondly, because they don't do it very often, they're probably not likely to do a very good job at it. Is it really engaging them in the meeting? Well, it's certainly engaging them in the meeting that they're chairing, but I wonder if it's engaging them in all the meetings. I suspect not. I don't think it's a good idea. I think this is a core skill of yours. I think it's a skill, and I'd be happy if you want to challenge that. Just type in the question box. I actually think that it's your job to do that. I actually think that's what you get paid to do, is to run these meetings. Not only to run them, but to run them efficiently and effectively. Happy to hear your view about that, but so I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's all about you engaging other people in the meeting by using good skills in terms of facilitating meetings, if that makes sense. Another thing I would strongly recommend that you consider when you're actually meeting with people is not to do too much reporting. I think the average meeting would probably say have about 80% reporting and perhaps even 20% discussion. Could I recommend to you to try to do that 50-50, 50% reporting and 50% discussion? Now, how do you reduce the reporting? Well, just ask people to report on the key performance indicators that are important, work out what they are, and be efficient about that. And you might also be thinking, well, what do we discuss? Well, when you've got your team in a room, there's a lot of things you can discuss. critical incidents that have occurred recently and lessons learnt. You could talk about the future and what people need to focus on. You could use it as an opportunity for people to share their own particular expertise. There are so many things that you can do in terms of discussion that I would strongly encourage you to do that. Why would you do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but one is to engage people in the meeting. Secondly is to get them completely absorbed and involved in the decision-making process. Thirdly, you just might find some great ideas from around the table that people can share because they're being asked to engage in a discussion. So the rule of thumb, in my view, is 50-50. So try very hard. You might not get it that way all the time, but that's the aim. That's what you're aiming to do. Now, what I suggest you do when you have this conversation around whatever it is, I think the best place to start is to look at some critical incidents. So what are some things that have occurred over, say, the last month that, without pointing fingers of blame and without sort of, embarrassing people, what could you possibly put on the table that would be a good opportunity to allow people to dissect it and to consider ways and means that perhaps that operation or that decision or that project could be done better? How could it be done faster? How could it have been done safer? How could it have been done better with cooperation with key stakeholders? Throw that on the table and do that, because I think you'll find that people will be quite engaged in that process. And then with your team members at the end, just agree that you're going to apply a couple of key principles next time collectively when faced with a similar incident. And I think if you do that, it becomes quite a useful meeting where you're hearing perspectives and getting people aligned to a certain way of doing things. So I think that's fair and reasonable, don't you, as far as getting that discussion going at team meetings and getting away from the mindless reporting process that we get in so many meetings. Of course, knowing what goes on is critically important, absolutely, but I think there's a lot of information that's shared in meetings that really doesn't need to be shared, and yet there's a lot of things that we need to discuss that really should be discussed in a team meeting. And the best place to start is practical, critical incidents that you can put on the table and discuss. Now, the other thing that I think is often goes unsaid in a team meeting is the people that sit around a table often do not understand clearly the roles that everybody else in the team plays. And in fact, they overestimate how clear their role is in the eyes of other people. So you've got a team of people sitting around a table. The boundaries between where a role starts and finishes is nowhere near as crystal clear as you might think if you're the team leader. It might be crystal clear in your eyes, but it probably isn't as crystal clear in the eyes of others. Now, when we're not quite sure of the roles that people play in teams, what tends to happen is that we apportion blame to other people, or we think that they should have done something when they didn't, and we get all sorts of argy-bargy around things like that because there isn't a crystal clear role definition in a team. So a practical thing that you can do in a team meeting is to ask each person of the team to give a 2 or 3 minute summary of the key priorities in their team. Now, that's a good thing to do, and it breaks up the meeting, makes it fairly interesting. Depends on what your team is and what they're doing, but if it's a cross-functional team, that is a team of people from different parts of the organisation that come together, then I think that's a vitally important task to do, because the fact is the more comfortable people are with the roles that other people play in the team, the more likely it is that you're going to get clearer decision-making processes occurring in the team. And of course, inevitably there'll be overlap too, that some people, think this is my territory and someone else thinks it's their territory. All of those things can be ironed out if we discuss them in a team meeting. Now, those of you who work in the outdoors, and I know we've got a fair group in this broadcast, one of the most effective types of meetings and the most underrated types of meeting is what we call a standing meeting. When you have a meeting standing up, I can assure you it goes a lot quicker and smoother because people don't want to be just standing around too much. So what happens is a stand-up meeting adds a degree of urgency. It also means that people get straight to the point a lot quicker, and you actually get more done in a standing meeting, often in a shorter amount of time. So you might like to consider that. I mean, it could even be done indoors in certain circumstances, but certainly it's very applicable. So it might be a work in progress meeting or a change of shifts, and you just want to clarify some of the issues that have occurred in the last shift. And so you have a stand-up meeting between the shift workers coming in the new shift and the shift workers from the old shift who are signing out. I think that can be very, very useful. So that's another tip that I think you'll find can be very, very effective. Now, I often think, frankly, if it's worth meeting, it's worth having an agenda. I think it's a sign of respect for your team members who are giving up some portion of their day to come and meet. And if you haven't planned out an agenda, then it looks a little sloppy. Now, obviously, if you're having a one-on-one spontaneous meeting with someone, you don't need an agenda. Well, you've got an agenda, but it doesn't need to be written down. But if you're getting your team together on a regular basis, I think it's critically important to have an agenda. What do you think? I just think that it's just sensible business. And on that agenda, a couple of key things that are really important. You don't need a million things on the agenda because you can't discuss a million things on the agenda. Just 5 or 6 key points would be enough. My strong inclination is not to have general business at the end of an agenda, because if you have general business, what happens is that could take up the whole meeting and people can come to the meeting unprepared, and as soon as the notion of general business comes up, they can talk and spruik about whatever they want. They have a license to do that. So I think if it's if it's worth discussing, it's worth having on the agenda. You can certainly ask if there are any other issues at the end of the meeting, but I just kind of think that an agenda could just be an excuse for people to talk about all sorts of things that perhaps needn't be discussed, and it's hard for you to say no to that if you've invited it. We've just got a question here about rotating the chair. I do this at team meetings. I think it's a great chance to learn by doing and challenging people. Would you think that this gives staff an insight about the workings and importance of the chairperson? I perhaps need to ask the question about rotating chair at our next team meeting. Look, I've just got a view that it's your job to chair the meeting and to make it as interactive as you can. I'm not sure that they necessarily need or want to learn how to chair meetings. And I agree with you, it might be a good idea to ask them at the next meeting what their opinion about that is. But, normally I'm not convinced that the quality of the meeting improves. In fact, in many cases it goes down. People often dread the idea of it. And I just think that if you're running your meetings and using some of the tools that I'm sharing here with you, I think you'd be far better off. And interestingly enough, and whilst they might not say it to you, it could well be true that some of your team believe clearly that that's your job. Okay? So in their mind, they see it as your job. And if they see it as your job, then they might feel that you're abrogating your responsibility. So I'm not a big believer in that. But if it's working for you, good. And if everyone's keen to do it, we'll continue. Why wouldn't you? So thanks for the question. Look, the other thing about an agenda and something you might like to consider, when people walk in late to a meeting, it can be extremely annoying. Hopefully it's not you if you're running the meeting. unless your boss wants to talk to you, of course, in the last minute. But look, I think that you should try. Just a little tip that works really well. Instead of having a meeting start at 9 o'clock, have it start at 8:50. By starting at 8:50, you're sending a very clear message that you expect people to be on time. It just means it stands out. All right, 8:50 means 8:50, not 9 o'clock, whereas 9 o'clock could mean 8:50 or 9:10. So, and the other thing is, if you've got stragglers coming into a meeting, just start the meeting. I mean, obviously, if no one's there, you can't, but you can be talking to yourself. But if one or two people habitually come in late, don't wait for them, because quite frankly, you're rewarding them. So you're actually rewarding them when they walk in late. So now we can start, so they can get a sense of importance, because the meeting couldn't start without me. So I don't think that's a very good idea. So don't wait for people. Just get on with it. It's like my lunch and learns. I know some of you have had other commitments and you've come in late to the broadcast, but look, honestly, I just start. I advertise the time and I just say, right, I'm doing it. Because another reason is you've got to respect the time of other people. I mean, the reality is you lead a busy life, just like me, like everybody else on the planet. And frankly, you've got things to do. So if I just decided to rock in and, okay, I'll just start the webinar at 11 o'clock today, and that means I go on for another 15 minutes, some of you obviously can easily check out. But nevertheless, it's not showing a huge amount of respect for you, is it? So start on time, finish on time, and with your agenda items, itemize them in terms of importance. So the most important thing goes first. Why? Because our energy level is high at the beginning of a meeting. So it makes sense to start with the things that are important, and also you get them off the list. The things that get left off the list, they go onto the agenda of the next meeting, and because they're less important, it shouldn't be problematic for you to do that. All right, so that's the agenda. If you've got any other tips on that, happy to hear them. But that's how I would roll with agendas. Now, the other thing that I think people don't do enough of at the end of the meeting is to summarise what's occurred at the meeting. Now, I'm not talking about reading out the minutes. That's a different story, and that's in a more formal meeting, perhaps. But I'm talking about someone that's got an aptitude in the meeting to be able to summarise the key points in the meeting. Now, you can do that if you're running the meeting, but I think it'd be a good job to delegate to someone else. Who else in the meeting has got this kind of knack of being able to sort the wheat from the chaff? The people who are able to come up with the key points about what has been discussed. Give them the job to do. They'll relish it. And then just at the end of the meeting say, well, Tom or Mary, can you just give us a summary of what some of the key points that we've discussed today in our meeting? And that way people walk out with a fresh impression of the key points that have come from the meeting, and everybody's happy. So you might want to think about that as something that you might include in your meetings, incorporate them as well. It works really well. Now, this chart, which will come up on your screen, here we go, there we are. It's just a simple chart to just say that, the energy level in a meeting will be very high at the beginning and will be low at the end. And so if you have to make some decisions collectively, the best time to do that is early on in the meeting. If you leave it towards the end, people are tired, they want to go to their next thing, they're probably not tuned in. It's likely you'll take longer to make that decision. Some people might be interested in grandstanding. So do your decision-making stuff up front, and just be aware that after a while people's attention drops off significantly, and that's why I think, as a rule of thumb, it's probably a good idea to stick with 1-hour meetings. I mean, if it can't be discussed in an hour, it's probably not worth discussing. I mean, at the end of the day, an hour is a reasonable amount of time if you're efficient and effective. And again, getting back to the cost of meetings, if you go for, say, 2 hours or 3 hours, if it's a board meeting or something where you might meet once every 3 months, that's a different story. So 1-hour meetings are great. and I think that's a good rule of thumb to use. So any questions, comments, observations at this stage, folks? Happy to hear them if you just type them in. Okay, just while you're thinking about that, the other thing that's interesting about meetings is that the configuration about how you set up meetings is quite important and can have a huge impact on the quality of the meeting. So I'm just going to run through some configurations with you, and I'd like you to think about the pros and cons of each of these configurations, because there are some significant benefits and drawbacks. So that means that these configurations are ideal for certain types of meetings. So if we start over on the left-hand top, the top left-hand side, you can notice that I've got the chairs lined up in theatre style. And out the front, we've got 4 people sitting at the top table. And so this is a typical sort of meeting when you're conveying information. So a shareholder meeting, or a meeting where there's really just one-way communication where the leader's sharing, or in this case, a team of 4 experts on a panel might be sharing their expertise with the rest of the team. This would be quite good for that sort of meeting, because it's not that you really want interaction between everybody anyway, and so you're not likely to get it either, by the way, with a theatre style of approach. But in that case there, that will work very, very well for you. Now, if the meeting is an education meeting, you can still have it set up in theatre style, which is the next one moving clockwise. You can have a classroom style, where the difference here is that everybody has a desk or is behind a desk, so they might want to jot notes down or, type in something on their laptop. This is ideal because it's an education meeting and people are expected to and probably intend to take notes. So for an education meeting, this is ideal. But again, what's the drawback is that you're not going to get much participation in your team because it's a very formal approach. Now, the third one there is the U shape, which is very typical for workshops, I find, and often motels, because I spend my life in motels running workshops and all sorts of things. And the fact of the matter is they will often set it up in a U shape. So if you don't tell people what you want, they will normally set it up in a U shape. Now, you can see that the U shape is actually very, very effective when you do want to get some conversation and discussion going on in your team, because as you can see there are a number of people facing each other. So it's a more conducive environment for cross communication. So that's a very good setup when you want the team to contribute to the conversation that's going on at the time. It's less formal, of course, than the theatre and the classroom style, but it's still got a degree of formality about it. And I personally, I don't mind that configuration, but I have other ideas about how I like that to be configured. The next one here, well, actually, no, we'll go around clockwise. The next one here is the cabaret style, or often in Australia we call it the cafeteria style. So the cafeteria style for a meeting is where you have everybody sitting around a small group. So a small group. So this is excellent where you want sub-teams, perhaps larger groups, who want to discuss concepts and ideas that have come out of a presentation. So it's fantastic for that because you've got people sitting around tables who are in a ready-made position to discuss some concept or idea. So it's wonderful for that. And of course you can do a little bit of social engineering as well and decide who sits around those groups. I remember doing this once with an organisation, and we made sure that the people who didn't get on with each other sat with each other. So we had a bit of a subtext going on that we had people who didn't actually get on with each other very well sitting with each other. So it's kind of forced them to get some sort of an alignment or agreement during the course of a day. The next one, which is a banquet style, is usually done at formal dinners and, often at graduations and things like that. You've got the dignitary sitting at the top of the table, and then you've got the tables where a number of people will sit around the table as such. That's great in a social environment. It's excellent. It's fine for having an after-dinner speaker, but you would expect that most of them would be conversing with each other during the meal when the speaker's not speaking, so it's a good setup that way. And the final one is around a conference table, and I suspect a lot of you probably would use the conference table configuration because it's convenient, and you walk into the room and there's the conference table. And it's very good in the sense that everyone's facing each other around a table, so there's a degree of unity that goes on. The person who's running the meeting could either be sitting at the head of the table or halfway down the table on one side. And the idea, of course, is to try and get as much conversation going on as possible. So that's not a bad configuration, but I just want you to be aware that when you're organising perhaps more formal meetings, have a think about what you want out of it. Obviously, if it's about information, conveying information to people, then the theatre or the classroom style is probably ideal. If you want a mixture of information and conversation, then the U-shape's probably very good. If you're keen to just get a lot of dialogue and discussion, then the cabaret and the conference style is very good. And if it's a dinner, the tables are important and you have more of a banquet style. So think about that, and my suggestion, because I deal with hotels all the time, is to let them know which of these configurations you want. By putting a little bit of thought in it, you'll get a better meeting, and that's exactly what we're on about, because the wrong configuration will lead to a poorer or suboptimal outcome. Now, the other thing I would say to you is that I think it's very important to consider the opportunities at your team meetings, that is your regular meetings, to have guest speakers. Now, you don't have to have formal guest speakers, but what about the team itself? Are there people within your team who can share information that would be quite valuable to the rest of the team, or just simply of interest? Could you rotate? We talked about rotating the chair. How about we rotate the speaking role? How about we get each person around the table to make a contribution at the meetings that are coming up? What could they talk about? They could talk about the challenges of their role. They could talk about the latest thinking in their area. I don't know, but I think it would enrich your meeting. It would give people a chance to understand who they're working with at a deeper level, and it'd give that person a platform, of course, to make certain points. Again, people might dread the concept of being able to chair a meeting, to be the guest speaker, but I think we'd all benefit from it by doing that. Who else could you get? Well, there's probably people outside your team. Why don't you invite some people, say HR or marketing or whatever, get them along to the meeting. A lot of people will relish the opportunity to get in front of your team to explain something because they might be pushing a barrow. But why not get them into the team meeting and give them 15 minutes to put a case? I think that enriches your meeting. And of course, those of you working in large organisations, no excuse. You've got all the resources there. How about we bring someone in who happens to be an expert or has an interest in something and get them to discuss it in the meeting? So that's a thought, just to enrich your meetings as such. Okay, now, I think the important thing that when we're dealing with people in meetings, one of the key things is how do you shut people up? Some people want to just dominate meetings, and it's very difficult for the person chairing the meeting to know how to shut them up other than to say shut up, and that doesn't often go too well. So here's what you do, and this is a very simple interpersonal skill that you should all learn. So when the person has drawn breath, right? So they've drawn breath, so you've got that split second where you can intervene. You should intervene. And what do you say? You paraphrase. So you say as the person facilitating the meeting, you might say, so in other words, your point is that you weren't given the right information, and because you weren't given the right information, you had difficulty making the quality decision. I don't know what it is they said. They might have taken a long time to say that, but you've just paraphrased it in one simple sentence or two. Now, why would you do that? Well, there's three reasons. One is you can check to make sure that you've got it right, and that in itself is an important skill. So have I got this right? Have I got the gist of what they're saying right? I'll paraphrase. So that's one. It also lets the speaker know that you've heard them, and that's good, isn't it? Because it's good for them to know that you've heard them. And of course, everyone else in the meeting knows that you've heard them as well. So they're thinking maybe you'll listen to me as well. And I guess the third and I believe most important reason for paraphrasing is that once you have paraphrased what it is that someone said, you now have the control of the agenda back. So in other words, you can then decide where to go from there. So as soon as you finish your paraphrasing, you can say, okay, we need to move on, or we need to cover the next thing, or let's park that for the time being. So you're in control when you paraphrase. So that's a little skill for you when that's how you shut people up. The other thing that I'd strongly recommend is that on your agenda item, you put a little number after each item in brackets. So you might have 5, bracket 5, bracket. What does that mean? That means that you've allocated 5 minutes to that topic. All right? So I fail to understand why people don't do this more often. It's so simple to do. So I've allocated 5 minutes to this topic. So if somebody's rambling on, you can easily say to them, look, we've only allocated 5 minutes to this. So could you be as brief as you possibly can in the interest of keeping this meeting running? No one can argue with that really if it's written on the agenda. So there's a little thought, and how long does that take? A couple of seconds for you to write down a number next to each agenda item, and that in itself is an opportunity for you to use that as an opportunity to stop people grandstanding in meetings. All right, so there's some thoughts. Of course, the other side of the equation is how in heaven's name do I get my quiet ones to talk? Every single meeting has one or two very quiet people who may not say anything, or when they do say something, it's usually quite valuable because they save it all up for one or two. But what you need to do here is to be quite assertive. So if you're having your meeting, you need to defer to someone and say you've got Kathy or Cam in your meeting. So you might say, Kathy, is there anything you'd like to say? Because we'd be keen to hear from you if you've got a point of view. Just ask the question. Now, of course, Kathy can say no, but think about the symbolism of this. Because I've deferred to Kathy and I've invited her to say something, what has happened is other people in the room think, wow, I better speak up. Why? Because the boss is going to defer to me. So you'll actually get more participation by just doing that. And of course, Kathy has every right to say no, there's nothing I want to add, and that's fine. She may not have anything to add, and you can't force her to say anything, but you're inviting her into the conversation, and that's the critically important point. And if she decides not to say anything, that's fine. You've just, out of courtesy and dignity, recognised that she might like an opportunity to say something. So that's how you get people involved. You shut people up by paraphrasing, and you get people involved by asking them directly if they'd like to contribute in the conversation. Whoops, go back one. You can use a concept called the team values charter as well. You might recall that I discussed this very briefly in Unit 2 under one of the influencing strategies. So what about if you did this in your team meeting? Now you'll get these slides, obviously, so you can take this with you. I know it works brilliantly because I've done it in private sector, public sector, not-for-profits. People love it and it works really well. So you actually have a meeting, and this is one of your discussion points, and you say to everybody, you ask them, of course, to write down their answers because you want some considered views. You might say, what is the one value that is important to you when we meet? Simple question. Ask people to write down the value. Then you say, what does it mean? So this is about you getting others to define, because sometimes a value like respect could have a multiple meanings. So you need to understand where they're coming from when they say whatever they say. You then ask them, why is it important? Now, it's good for you to know that. Why is it important? You then ask what behaviours would demonstrate that value. So what are the behaviours that you would expect people to demonstrate to be consistent with that value? And of course, the flip side is what values would violate that, what behaviours would violate that value. So what you're trying to do is to create what we call a team values charter. And that charter then can be used to run the meetings. It can be used to basically, monitor the behaviour and tone of the team anyway, because everyone's contributing. And the reason that this works extremely well is not because of those questions. I mean, that's not the key here. The key to this and why it works extremely well is that you're expecting every single person to contribute. And because everyone's had a stake in the charter, it's likely that they will contribute and be honouring the charter more so than if you were the one that just plonked down a series of values and said, that's what I want, let's go. So they are designing a kind of a framework about how they will deal with each other, both individually and collectively in the team environment. Now, it stuns me, but this is something that I do not understand why people don't do. It is so simple and so powerful. Start your meetings off with a win for the week. Assuming, of course, you meet weekly. Why not just go round the table and say win for the week? And you're just trying to get a handle on what's going on around the place that's positive. Now, you'll find some people have a real problem with this. They'll sit there and think, I can't think of anything, which, of course, is a bit of a problem in itself, isn't it? That they can't think of anything, not that nothing's gone right for the week. Of course it has. It's just that they haven't focused on it. So go around the table and ask people for the win for the week. You start yourself and then move around, and you'll be surprised. It creates this upward spiral of positivity. And this upward spiral of positivity will be a much better way to go in your meetings than it will be, say, let's just talk about the first problem on the agenda. Why don't you just have a win for the week? And you'll find that after you've done it for a while, people will come into the meeting talking about some of the things that are going on in their personal life. That, to me, is not problematic at all. In fact, it's a good thing. So there's a very practical, simple thing that you can do. Of course, you've got to lead the way. And of course, the first time you do it, people will give you a very strange look. Don't worry about it. Just do it, because it'll work. It'll work really well. You're going to talk about the problems. You might as well talk about what's going well as well. It keeps you informed of information that you may not be aware of anyway. So it's a good thing to do. So guys, that brings us pretty much to a close. If you've got any questions, now is the time to type them in, because we're just about to sign off. So type them in if you wish to make a comment, ask any questions in relation to any of the material that I've run through today. But I would say to you that your homework, as you could probably imagine, is I'd like you to go away and apply some of these new approaches to your meetings. Now, not everything I said today might be of value to you. Some of the things I said to you may be doing. Some of the things I've said to you just don't want to go there. Not a problem. All I want you to do now is to actually say, okay, I like that win for the week. I might do a team values charter, or I might actually put numbers after the agenda items to indicate and signify how much time each item will take. Whatever it is. So just apply one or two key things. And if anyone gives you flack and says, what are you doing? Just say, well, I'm just trying to improve the quality of our meetings. I mean, it's pretty hard for anyone to argue about that, isn't it? So just go and do that. You have an obligation, as I said, to try to improve the quality of your meetings. So that's pretty much it from me, folks. So I'm going to sign off now if there's no questions. And look, I wish you a really fantastic weekend. And I'd also like to thank you very much for your involvement in the Lunch and Learn. It's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you for your comments and encouragement. And there's been plenty. It sounds like it's been a success, generally speaking, and I really appreciate the opportunity of working with you. I should also say to you, just before I sign out, that there's another program starting. It's only in a week's time, but that's fine. We can get all that organised very quickly. But if you've got anyone who would like to be involved in the Lunch and Learn in your teams, or you'd like to, you know, send them my way. My email address is there. It's easy to get registered. You know the drum, you know how it works. But if you think someone else in the organisation would benefit, then let them know, because the more the merrier. But anyway, that's about all for me, and I look forward to working with you perhaps in the future. Thanks, Craig. Nice comment. Thanks, Thor. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Appreciate those comments. So I'm going to leave you there, and all the best, and have a great weekend, and thank you. Thank you very much, and goodbye.